Hello everyone. So this is the season of fact check units. Everybody wants to start a fact check unit. First the union government said they are going to start a fact check unit. Now the Karnataka government wants to start a fact check unit. So I think fact check units by governments are a bad idea in itself. But there is so much of fake news, right? Misinformation. Can't governments do anything about people lying outright on social media or even media? Of course they can. But a fact check unit run, maintained, operated by the government is not the way out. And this is what we're going to discuss in this week's No Filter with Dhanya Rajendran. Okay, so before we go any further, I need to tell you that I find this whole use of the word fake news problematic. Why? Because if it's fake, it can't be news, right? There are many people who think the same as me and they've been advocating that this word itself should not be used. But it's a simple term, people understand it now, fake news. So what are the two different kinds of news which are fake? One is misinformation and the second is disinformation. Misinformation is misleading news, out of context, it's false, but it's put out there without an intent to deceive. For example, if someone comes to Bengaluru one fine day and says, the traffic here is really good, that there are no water problems in Bengaluru. That's misinformation because it is not true. Bengaluru does have a lot of traffic problems, but perhaps not on that road on which that person was traveling. But that news is put out without an intent to deceive, right? That is misinformation. Disinformation is when false, misleading, out of context news is put out there with a clear intent to deceive and to create problems. So misinformation and disinformation. What are these fact check units going to deal with? How will they differentiate between misinformation and disinformation? That's the first question we should ask. Okay, so what are the two governments doing now, which is the union government and the Karnataka government? The union government actually brought the digital media rules in 2020. Many of us have opposed it. In fact, I've gone to court against it. So have many other journalists, websites, associations and unions. Now, an amendment was brought to the digital media rules in 2023 April, in which the government said that, hey, we are going to set up fact check units. So the announcement was made prior to this, but the law was amended only in April 2023. Even when the announcement was made, everybody pointed out that this will just be another tool that the government uses to ensure that news which is against the government is not put out on media. So after all the furor, the government said, okay, fine, it will not be against the media, it will not be against journalism, but there will be a proper fact check unit. It's yet not clear what this fact check unit will be, but the Indian Express has reported that there will be 4 members on this fact check unit team, which consists 2 people from 2 ministries, which is the IT ministry and the statistical ministry. There will also be 1 media expert and 1 legal expert. There will also be analysis wings and other bodies which they will consult. Now on to the Karnataka government. There is no clarity here also, though Chief Minister Siddaramaiah has agreed that there will be a fact check unit. Karnataka government has also been questioned as to what is the need for a fact check unit, how will you ensure that it works properly, or what is the necessity for it. So their reply has been that it will be apolitical, it will be devoid of bias. But let's first understand that fact check units by the government to fact check the media or even social media to some extent is a problematic thing because the government's intent is always suspect. Why should a government have a fact check unit? The government's first interest will be to protect itself, no matter who runs the government, which party runs the government. Now, why do I say that the government's intent is always suspect? That is because we have to question their motivation, right, behind saying a news is factual or not. Let's take a few examples of things that have happened in the past. When the pandemic was underway, we had reports from all across the country that people had died in hospitals because of lack of oxygen. You yourself must have known of family, friends or someone who did not get oxygen in the hospital and they passed away. But if you look at the parliament data, there are hardly any people in India who died for this reason. Why? Because governments are lying. They do not want to tell the country, they do not want to present this data. And in this case, all the state governments and eventually the union government is lying. So how do I as a journalist know that people have died in hospitals because there was lack of oxygen? I would have spoken to doctors, spoken to nurses, spoken to other staff in the hospital, families. That's the only way that we can do stories, right? We speak to sources. We understand what is happening and we bring it to you. And then you as a reader, the viewer, the consumer, there is a connect between us. There is a level of trust between us, which is why that news is put out. But then the government comes and says, hello, nobody died in hospitals because there was lack of oxygen. How are we going to combat that? How are we going to tell the government, no, that is not true? So governments all over can do this. They can say, we are fact checking and simply label a news as false, even if it's not. There are several other examples. In fact, I had done a show earlier illustrating some of these examples. There was once a story done by a reporter about how the union government is asking the Aadhaar card for giving children food through midday meals. The government just denied it, but there was a lot of paperwork. That reporter had brought out all the paperwork, but coolly the government said that is false news. So every time a government says that a news is false or the government wants to start a fact-checking unit, as citizens, we need to ask the government, what is your motive? Now, one more example I can give you is that recently Prime Minister Modi had visited South Africa. At that time, one of the known media outlets there called Daily Maverick had published a story saying that the Prime Minister refused to get down the airplane because the South African president had not come to the airport to welcome him. Now, was this news true or false? Daily Maverick had its sources. Someone told them that this happened and they reported the news. Within a few hours, they put out a story saying that, not a story, they put out a statement saying that their site is down because they're being attacked by bots from India. Basically, too many people trying to reach the site and the site crashes. So they said it was a targeted bot attack on them. Who did that? Well, that's anybody's guess. They pointed fingers at the Indian government and the BJP, obviously. So this is the problem. Daily Maverick reports a news. The government or the BJP believes it is false and it can do a lot of things which is legal, illegal, etc. But if the same story had been reported by an Indian media house and if such a fact-checking unit was there, then the government can simply say that, hello, this news is false and they can take it down. Because that's one of the powers which the amendment gives to the fact-checking unit. The fact-checking unit can tell any internet service provider, any social media platform that a particular story is false and pull it down. Not just that. If I had published a story, will the government first ask my explanation as to how did you know the story is true? No, there is absolutely no conversation between the media house and the government. Now, to give you another example, last few weeks, the media in Karnataka, including us, have been covering this court judgment in the rape and murder of Saujanya, a young woman from coastal Karnataka who was killed in 2012. Recently, a court acquitted a man named Santosh who was accused of this crime. So the story was that Saujanya's family never suspected this man, but they believed another group of men had murdered her. So while reporting this story, a lot of important names were used. And of course, this story was taken down as 3 people went to court saying that it is defamatory. Now, the court did not ask us, the News Minute, or many other media organizations, what our version is. This group of people who went to the court simply got a gag order and our documentaries were removed from social media platforms. This is the same power which government wants now. So government will say the story is false. It does not even have to go to the court. The government simply decides and takes it off. You can now understand how dangerous the situation is going to be. One more thing that the Karnataka government particularly has been saying that there's a lot of communal stuff on social media and we have to combat it. Yes, there is a lot of communal stuff on social media. In fact, I would say there's a lot of communal stuff on mainstream media. Our mainstream media contributes more to communalism in this country than anybody else. I mean, at least this is my opinion. Let me give you another example for this. Recently, there was an incident where 3 Muslim women had kept a mobile camera inside a bathroom in Udupi College to record a friend of theirs. Now, another young woman came to the bathroom and it was her visual that got recorded. But initially, when the right wing propagated this news, they put out tweets saying hundreds of videos of young, unsuspecting Hindu women have been recorded. And those tweets went viral, those videos went viral, they're still there. But let's imagine the Karnataka government had a fact-checking unit at that time. What can they do? Can they take this tweet down saying hundreds of videos are not there because the investigation is still on, right? Maybe the Karnataka government knows there are no hundreds of videos, but it still cannot go ahead and take it down because there is an investigation process. So the government is going to just bind itself in knots if it is going to have a fact-check unit, because legally you cannot do a lot of things about the kind of stuff that people are propagating on social media. So now you're going to ask me, okay, the government can't run fact-check units, the government cannot take down communal tweets, what can the government do? I'm not saying the government cannot take down communal tweets, but to have a fact-check unit and to institutionalize this, that is a problem. But if the government does feel that there is something problematic, the government has a lot of options before it. It can, of course, in certain circumstances, go to a social media platform and ask for things to be taken down. But the question here is about transparency. Every year, India is asking for thousands of posts to be taken down from social media platforms. Not just the government of India, but even state governments are asking. Where is the transparency? Is the government putting out a list at the end of every year saying this was communal, this was not factual, etc., etc.? There is absolutely no transparency as to what the government does. Therefore, an institutionalized fact-checking unit is a bad idea. But there are other things that the government can do, which is to prosecute people. If the government believes that a particular news is false or it is disinformation, then there are various laws that are available in this country which the government can use to prosecute people. Otherwise, something that has always been talked about is hate speech law. To codify what is hate speech, to explain what is hate speech, and to bring in a law. That's something that India has never done. If that happens, perhaps a lot of people can be prosecuted under that law. Another example is this cow vigilante a person accused of murder called Puneet Kerahalli. When the BJP was in power, he was doing all sorts of things. He was on Facebook all the time, doing these very provocative lives. And then, of course, he was accused of murdering a Muslim man who was transporting cows. When the BJP was in power, he was put in jail for this murder because obviously there's no other way out. And then he came out on bail. Once the Congress came to power, they took all the stuff that he has done on Facebook or Twitter, whatever it is, and they filed many cases against him. And they also slapped Gundas Act on him and he is in jail. So there are laws. These laws, when wanted, the government can use to prosecute people. But the problem is the lack of intent, which is where we come to this common excuse of, oh, but riots are happening. There is too much communal stuff on social media, right? As a journalist, I can tell you that when you go to the ground, you speak to police people, you speak to bureaucrats, you speak to whoever you want. They will tell you a riot cannot happen if the government does not want the riot to happen. Riots can be controlled by governments. It is because governments allow these ecosystems to flourish. So first, what are you doing to tackle these ecosystems? For example, a person like Puneet Kerahalli or the Monu Manesar from Haryana. What are you doing to tackle these ecosystems? That should be your first attention as a government. Let the union government and Karnataka government make it clear how these fact-check units will function. What kind of transparency will they have? How will they indulge and involve civil rights activists, media people, etc.? So if the modalities are very clear, then there are few things the government should be allowed to do. Like there are things which are grey on social media, on mainstream media. There are things which are clearly black. Can the government act on it immediately? How will the government act on it? These are things which perhaps the government can consider. Oh, I forgot to add something. If the police are involved in any of these fact-check units, then it's a complete no. Anytime you try to bring the police into these kind of initiatives, everybody should just oppose it. I can imagine that the comment section is going to be filled with, but there is fake news. You media, you are fake news. You don't want the government to control you. I'm not disagreeing that there is a problem of misinformation and disinformation, both on social media and on mainstream media. Now, if you ask me, TV channels do more disinformation than anybody else. But when has a channel been taken to court? When have they been prosecuted? When have TV channel shows been taken down? There are very few examples, and that too when civil rights bodies have gone to court against these channels. What have governments done? Almost nothing, right? So there are things the government should do and there are things the government should not do. The first thing that perhaps the Karnataka government can do is to tackle the root of the problem, which is communalism in this instance. They have to go to people, educate them. They have to tackle the ecosystem. There are so many things that a government can do. More ideas I can give, including the fact that do not say no to the media when they come to ask you for information, ask you for data. Do not try to block the media with all kinds of excuses, with denials, etc. So that's it from me this week on No Filter with Dhanya Rajendran. And we have an exciting announcement. We are going to be starting podcasts. Apparently, I am also doing a podcast. Hopefully, I'll have a time to do the podcast. But yes, the podcast will keep coming. So become a member of the News Minute, because some of these things will go behind paywalls. You will have to become a member to listen to some very interesting conversations. And remember, this is your chance to also support the independent media. Thank you.